Hello everybody, today I've got another guide demonstrating an ILS approach with the Working Title CJ4. This video is meant to be an update to the original ILS guide I made a few months ago because the mod has seen some pretty big changes since then regarding how to fly an ILS approach, so I wanted to make sure those changes were covered in the guide. So like the last video, I'll start out with a quick approach briefing so you have a good mental picture of the approach, and then we'll go ahead and jump into the sim and try it out. So here's the approach we're going to be flying today. It's the ILS Zulu approach to runway 19 at Jackson Hole. And up in the top left here we have our localizer frequency of 109.1. The identifier is IJAC. Our approach course is 187 degrees. We have 6,300 feet available for the landing. And this is a high elevation airport, so it's reflected up here. Here's our missed approach briefing. Should we have to go missed approach and we're not vectored by ATC. Going from the top-down view here, we'll be flying this approach from the Denor VOR and then joining up at Zibiv. And if we scroll down further, we got our profile view. And so here's all of our altitude constraints for the approach. Our initial approach fix is Yusku. And our missed approach point is 2.3 DME from the Jackson localizer. Over here we can see that it's going to be a 3 degree glide slope, which is pretty standard. And going down to the bottom to the minima, we have the straight in ILS for runway 19. And we have this number sign at the end, and that's going to be referencing us to this up here, which is just describing that the missed approach requires minimum climb of 235 feet per nautical mile to 10,600 feet. So that's pretty easily done in the CJ4, so we'll have no problem using this minimum of 6,651 feet and 4,000 feet of visibility, which is essentially 3/4 of a mile. And the last thing I want to just quickly point out is, since we're flying in from the southeast, our MSA from the Jackson VOR out to 25 miles is 13,000 feet. So just make a mental note of that, and with that we are done with the brief. Let's go ahead and jump in the plane. Okay, so here we are up at cruise. Let's go ahead and start setting up the approach. The first thing I want to cover is a question a lot of people have regarding what to do if you aren't assigned a runway yet and you still want to use VNav to take you down. So what you can do is actually set up a dummy waypoint that VNav can target. So easiest way to do it is to just take the airport, enter a slash, and what we'll do is put a point at the edge of our MSA, so 25 miles. And we'll just give it a generic name, so like waypoint 1, and we'll put it on Jackson. So then we'll insert this waypoint along the track from Gani to Jackson, and you can see here it's 25 miles away from the airport. And if we look up here, we've got Gani, waypoint 1, Jackson, and if we hit execute, you'll notice we still have this advisory descent point, and that's because we haven't entered a altitude constraint yet. So for VNav to target this, we have to enter in exact altitude constraint. So if we remember from the approach briefing, our MSA from the southeast is 13,000 feet. So we'll just enter 15,000 feet and put it here by waypoint 1. And we can see that our advisory descent points now changed to top of descent. And if I turn the FMS text on, you can see it's now, VNav will now target 15,000 feet to waypoint 1. And that would give us just a general point that we could either go southwest and then fly the RNAV for runway 1, or north up to join the ILS. So that's just a little trick you can use if you don't know the landing runway yet. But for us, we know where we'll be flying the ILS, so we'll go ahead and clear that out, hit execute, and now we're back to the descent point. So let's go ahead and load the ILS. So we go to departures, arrivals, select the ILS 19 Zulu, And we'll make sure our ZBIV transition is selected. And before we execute, let's go back to legs, and we can see we go GANI, discontinuity, and ZBIV. We actually want to put the Denora VOR in there before ZBIV, so we'll do that. And then put the Denora VOR on the discontinuity, and hit execute. And now we'll just verify this is correct by going to our plan view, and then stepping forwards, we go next. So there's GANI, and we go the Denora VOR, and ZBIV, SOSU, Wamru, Yesku, our initial approach fix, then SOSU. And if we wanted, we could also go to display menu, next, and then put our missed approach on there as well. And it's basically just flying down the valley to kick me. So that's good. We have our approach set up. Next thing we can do is set up our frequencies. So if we go to tune, and actually before that, if we go to index, next, arrival data, you can see that we have this ILS frequency for our approach. If you don't see a frequency here, it says NAN for not a number. That's really only a problem with add-on sceneries. And what that will mean is that the plane will not automatically tune the ILS frequency for you when you enter the terminal area, and you'll just have to enter it manually instead. However, this is a standard airfield, and we have the frequency here, so we can just leave our nav1 frequency empty for now. For our nav2 radio, it might be a good idea to put the Jackson VOR in there, and that frequency is 115.4. Enter that there. Don't have to worry about the ADF at all. For our comm frequencies, we can go to index, frequency, select the Jackson airport, and grab the ATIS frequency, go back to tune, and just put that in the standby frequency for now. When we get closer, we can tune into the ATIS and punch in the numbers for our approach information. But for now, we'll just leave it like that. Moving on to the display setup. We don't really need to do much here. One thing we can do now is set up the minimums, so we'll go to refs menu, select barometric, and our minimums for the straight-in ILS are 6,651 barometric. So we'll select 6,650. We can hit escape. If we wanted to, we could display the Jackson VOR here, but personally I think it's just going to get a little cluttered with that on there, so we just leave that off. And last thing I like to sometimes do is go to index, Datalink, weather, request, and then just get the latest METAR information for the airfield, just to get a general picture of the weather to expect there. So if we go here, you can see winds calm, 10-mile visibility, overcast at 900. Temperature is 16, dew points 11, altimeter is 3026. So overall, pretty clear weather in Jackson Hole right now. If we wanted, we could also preset our altimeter to 3026. And if you're in standard and you move the baro knob, you can actually preset the altimeter so that when you come out of standard, it'll jump to this preset value, which is pretty neat. But for now, we'll just go back to legs. And as we approach our top of descent, I'll turn VNAV on now. I'll keep the pre-selector up at our cruising altitude until we're like within, say, 10 miles of our top of descent. Then I'll drop the pre-selector down, and I'll pick the video up again once we are approaching the Denora VOR. Okay, so here we are in our VNAV descent, coming up to the Denora VOR. And down here we've got this loc will be tuned message. So we switch to our tune page. Just give it a second. And there we go. The plane's now auto-tuned the nav1 frequency to our ILS frequency of 109.1. And that's because up here we've got this term message, which just means we've entered the terminal area. So we're within 30 miles of the airport. Additionally, we've got these blue needles now. These are the ghost needles, showing us the position of the localizer. And with the ghost needle, we also have this half of a blue diamond over here showing us our position relative to the localizer. And once we get closer, we'll probably get a blue diamond over here showing us our position relative to the glide slope. And these are really useful because we can stay in FMS1, so following a GPS course, and also monitor the localizer at the same time. So, start throwing all our lights on. One thing I want to mention is that if the plane can't auto-tune the nav1 frequency, you'll get a check loc tuning message down here. So you just have to enter the frequency manually, and the message should go away once it picks up the ghost needle. So I've got this 200 here. So at Zosov we have a 200 knot restriction, so we'll just plop that in there. You just have to be below 200 knots at Zosov. Okay, so here we are coming up on Denora. Start slowing it down to 250 knots since we're approaching 10,000 feet. And we're also starting our approach, so it's good to just slow it up. Okay, so we've got 1,000 feet to 13,000. I'll go ahead and clear myself for the ILS Zulu approach for runway 19, and also clear myself to land. I'm not using ATC or VATSIM right now, so just make those clearances myself. And our final restriction is... we'll put it at our initial approach fix of 8,000. Once we actually join the ILS, and capture the glide slope, we can put our pre-selector up to, I believe it was 10,100 or 14,000. 14,000 for our missed approach. Now this approach can get a little weird with VNAV because the VNAV path is almost coincident with the glide slope, and you have to actually intercept the glide slope or be below it and let it come down to actually capture it. So we may have to at some point disable VNAV and then just VS manually for a little bit to actually pick up the glide slope, but we'll see as we get closer. So coming up on our Zibiv transition. Now we've got this message to check speed because we have a 200 knot restriction coming up at Zosov, so keep slowing it down. Turn the anti-ice off. Just going through some clouds up there, so I had it on. Go ahead, pop the speed brake out. Our check speed message has gone away since we're like 10 to 15 knots sorry, we're within 10 to 15 knots of the speed restriction. So pop the speed brake back up. Okay, and now that we're pretty much on an intercept course to the localizer, we'll go ahead and arm approach. So here we have approach loc 1 armed in white. So now once the plane detects movement in this localizer needle, it will do a nav to nav transfer, meaning we'll switch automatically from FMS1 to loc 1. And you'll get a nav-to-nav transfer anytime you have an ILS frequency loaded up and you intercept the localizer. And if you have to enter the frequency manually for the ILS, it shouldn't make a difference. Okay, so as expected, VNav is going to have us just slightly high of our glide slope, so what we can do is just turn VNav off, enter vertical speed, and just descend a little bit faster. And there we go. We've now captured the localizer. Glide slope is still armed in white here because we haven't actually captured the diamond yet. So now that we've captured the diamond, glide slope went green. And we can now set our pre-selector
altitude
right here to our missed approach, 14,000. And as we get spun around here, I'll just sync the heading real quick. And we're about 7 miles out, so let's go ahead and drop flaps, 15, and drop the gear. In the descent, I punched in the performance data. So if we go to approach, you can see windscom, temperature 16. There's the altimeter, and then just hit send. So we've got a VRF of 109 and V approach of 116. And I actually forgot to take the plane out of standard. So if you don't tell anyone, I won't tell anyone. Okay, we've got 4 DME. From the airport, we'll go ahead, drop full flaps, start slowing up to our approach speed. And about 1,000 feet.
autopilot
About 1,000 feet AGL, I like to take manual control. We can go ahead and turn the yaw damper off too. So now at this point, you can either keep flying the diamonds on the PFD or just switch to visual. And just keep it getting slowed up here.
500
And our minimums are at 200 feet AGL, so we got another 250-ish feet or so to that. And I believe right here, 2.3 DME is our actual missed approach point. And I'm just slipping a little bit below the glide slope, intentionally just so I can put it down smoother on
minimums
touchdown markers. That's our minimum call out. Keep it on the center line. Drop it back to VREF. And go idle. We don't want to flare, just round it out a bit. There we go. Get the speed brake out. Gently let the nose down. And we can start braking. And we can go ahead and make this turn off here. And once we're clear of the runway, we'll go ahead and pull the flaps up, can put the speed brake up. turn off our pitot heat, and turn our taxi light on, strobes off. And from here we can go ahead and taxi to parking and call it a day. So hopefully that helped some people trying to learn how to do the ILS approach with the Working Title CJ4. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and that should be it. So see everybody next time.